Welcome back. I'm Kate Luzio. I'm the founder and CEO here at Luminary and your host on Goaldigger, right here live on LinkedIn. I've been hosting this since April of 2020. So it's crazy that it is now almost 2 years since I started this. But what's amazing is that since going online and this whole virtual world, although we're now hybrid as well, we have had some incredible guests that probably wouldn't have been able to come in person, although Kat can. We are excited to have Kat Garcia, who is the founder and co-CEO at Shares, which you're going to hear all about, but also building her own personal brand and her platform. And welcome, Kat.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So excited to have you. And we're going to talk a lot about Shares, which I happen to be personally involved in now. And I'm very, very excited about this journey and what you're doing. But we always back it up with our guests and learn a little bit about their journey and their story and sort of what led you to where starting Shares and why this was so important. But it would be great to hear a little bit about your background, how you grew up, and sort of what gave you this ability to take massive risks and start your own thing.
Yeah, that's a big question. It's so interesting because I feel like at first glance, my life doesn't really make sense in the many things that I've done, and I've been very fortunate and blessed to do. So I would say that the theme of my life has been creativity and analysis, and really being at the intersection there and finding technology at that center point to drive a lot of my decisions. But I started out, actually, I'm from Montreal, Canada originally. My parents are Colombian. And so already I grew up learning 3 languages, French, English, Spanish. And that allowed me to be, immersed in 3 different cultures and worlds that I navigated. So when I was younger, I started off as a television actress as well as a independent artist. So I was putting out singles. I was an early YouTuber. And as I sort of grew up in this very early YouTube space of content platforms, I remember doing it because I wanted to be able to control a lot of my audience and my story, and being the only Latina as well as the only minorities in the entire network at the time. I was a television actress on a television show in Quebec that played in many different parts of the world and in Europe as well. I remember I didn't have press rights, and I just felt the desire to be like, well, if you're not going to give me press rights, I'm going to go and get press somewhere else. And I just, created my YouTube and really evolved from there. And yeah, that was the initiation, but so much has happened since.
So it's interesting. You're in Montreal. You're a woman of color. You've had all of these sort of like, you're the only. What gave you the confidence to sort of use your voice or find your voice to kind of overcome a lot of that, which I imagine gave you a lot of confidence as you've built your own thing over the years?
Yeah, I think I always just saw it as I love being underestimated, and being the underdog in many ways is actually really helpful because it gives you this ammunition to prove people wrong. So taking that negative energy and turning it into positive, but also finding the light. And so many people that looked like me were like, oh, you made my childhood so much better. And I felt represented, and just leaning into that kind of positivity. But at the same time, I've always just been a very ambitious person where I just was the kind of person that I would say, if I want to do something, I will do it, and I will find a way. Nothing and no one will stop me. And also, diversity is something so beautiful, like knowing those 3 languages growing up. And it gave me a superpower because I was like, I can speak into 3 different worlds. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I didn't see it as a disadvantage.
No. And I think that's when we see people using what could be perceived as disadvantages as an advantage and they embrace that. I think that, and I love that underdog feeling. I feel like that quite a bit in my career. So you're YouTubing, you're doing all this stuff. Then what?
Yeah, I got to university and I was studying business. So when I got to that point, it was very much a crossroad, because growing up, my parents were like, "We'll let you do the acting thing and the singing thing, but only if you actually do calculus and are like top of your class." That was the deal. So I was like working full time while also going to school throughout my teenage years. But when I got to university, it was a lot more serious, where I was like, oh wait, everybody's either doing consulting, investment banking, or they're thinking about the future in terms of like what lane you pick. And then if not, like when I would be going on set, a lot of the principal actresses were being like, do you want to be an actress when you grow up? And I'm like, I am an actress, like what are you talking about? It was just really confusing. And at one point I kind of let go, because people didn't really want to hire me, even in marketing jobs, because we were at a point in time when influencing was not a thing, nor did it make sense for a lot of Fortune 100s. They were like, what does YouTube have anything to do with marketing?
Right.
And I was like, this is the future. But they just didn't get it. And so I took a step back and I just like spoke to over 100 people. And I remember I was flying around Europe because I did a study abroad, and started interviewing CEOs, founders, creative directors from different agencies, to try to understand, like, how do I marry business with the arts and creativity? And so that's really where consulting firms were buying out digital advertising agencies and creative studios. And I found opportunities there, and they really liked the way that I was very analytical, but also, again, creative and thought about business.
So then where did that lead you to?
I joined Accenture. So I was working at Accenture in management consulting, but not in Canada. I was flying every week for like 3 years to San Francisco, London, England, and New York. And so at one point, that's when I was like, ooh, New York. And just really wanted to move to New York and do what I was doing, but at a bigger scale. And so I joined BCG Digital Ventures, where I started building out fintechs and a lot of different companies or startups for these large corporations, which was, again, that not consulting, but I think like business, but being able to create startup.
Yeah. So very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Within an organization. So at this point, you're getting all of this exposure to fintech and what that is in that world, plus the creator world that you lived in, right? Because you were doing stuff on the side. Is that what gave you the idea for Shares?
I think so. Yeah. Even throughout university, I did a triple major. So I did.
Of course finance. You did.
Yeah. I was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to have a startup one day, or like a company one day. And therefore I need to understand these different facets of business and management. So I did finance, information systems, and marketing. And it felt like, as a woman, people are like, you dress really well, so you should go into marketing, or you'll definitely be in marketing. But they never were like, oh, you're so good at math, and therefore you're going to be in like finance.
Yeah, right.
Like, that was never the thing. And I was like, why don't people assume that I'd be good in finance? And so that was a bit of something that I had like a chip on my shoulder. And so I created on YouTube, I went from the whole acting and singing stuff to the corporate diary, where I started interviewing women in male-dominated fields, specifically friends in banking. Like a lot of my girlfriends who were working in investment banking and wealth management were also the cases that I was on during my time at Accenture. So I worked with UBS, TD Ameritrade, and a lot of different banks. And I felt like women were not really supported. We weren't really designing a lot of fintechs or wealth management digital transformations, thinking about them and how we are different in many, many ways. And it's hard to generalize, and I don't want to speak for all women, but I just did not feel represented And so I started this YouTube called The Corporate Diary. Um, and at the same time at work, I was creating these like user journeys and customer journeys to understand how to support mostly men in their wealth management journeys. But I was like,
Right.
where are the women? Like, where am I in this?
Yeah.
So throughout that entire frustration and this known fact that like women do want to invest, we do want to put our money in the market. We also want to make more money now, also in crypto and NFTs, Web3. I knew that there was high desirability, but no one was really thinking about women or diversity in the ways that I was.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we see it, right? I mean, as a former banker for all those years, right? There wasn't a lot of messaging. There might have been messaging and marketing, but it wasn't talking to us or to and again, generalizing in the way that I would have liked, right? I know that's been tried, and everyone's continuing to try to do that. But there's also this, whole new generation that's coming up. There's a ton of new information, crypto, Web3, NFTs. We were talking about that the other day. So there's a lot coming at people. And then where do I put my money? And what am I supposed to do with it? And do I have a 401k? And should I put it all in crypto? And should I have Bitcoin? You saw an opportunity to really change the way people think, especially in that younger millennial, Gen Z, and coming up after that is Alpha. Of how they demystifying almost finance for them, personal finance. So that was the impetus for starting Shares.
Yeah, and I would say that for me, my mission has always been to support women and minorities. But I think that anyone that really falls within Gen Z, young millennials, can really understand a lot of these frustrations, because it is set to be the most diverse generation of all time. And so when we think about different behaviors, I was going on Instagram stories and trying to like swipe to when my friends were posting their Robinhood portfolios, because like these friends, I trusted, I knew that they had a lot of money because of the way that they had invested in the past. And so I was like, oh, and it was just weird because I kept trying to do this, like swiping up, and I'm like, why am I doing that? And the more that I spoke to people, the more I was like, wait a second, finance is becoming this thing that is community driven. It is also very social, because everything that we have been exposed to as these young millennials and Gen Zs that are digitally native has been always social. So how is finance, or the world of finance or investing, supporting that that cultural and technological barriers? And so I kept trying to like pitch this to a lot of the different corporations that I was working with, and they're like, no, like, this is the future. They're like, why would anyone want to see your friends' trades? Like, that's really weird. I'm like, people are sharing salaries, and they're like,
people are sharing. People like love watching on Venmo what people are doing, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, because that's how you know if people are dating.
Yes.
So it is all social. It's transparency, and it at the end of the day, like whether you agree or disagree, that is the way that people are headed. And you can either fight the good fight, or you can, join and try to solve for how to make that actually a good behavior and support that behavior.
Yeah, because this whole idea of crowdsourcing of information, right? I mean, I'm a Gen Xer. That wouldn't have been something that we would have done, nor did it exist. Now it's almost this open source of, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here are the things I've done. And because of that community and that communal sort of feel, you're like, oh, if Kat did it, and I know her, and I feel like I trust her and her judgment, maybe this is something I should look into. So what's the goal of the company, and where are you at right now?
Yeah, I think our goal is very much helping everyone thrive in the economy. And what we see today is that there are two different kinds of economies, and they're quite siloed. There's Web 2, so anything that's stocks, equities, and traditional investments or finance. But then there's Web 3, which is crypto, NFTs, DeFi projects, or decentralized finance. And so really being able to think about the pain points in both worlds, where in Web 2, a lot of the younger generations feel like they weren't a part of creating that world, and they feel like culturally cannot relate, and therefore it's boring for them. But then for Web3, it's exciting, crypto's new, but technologically there are so many hurdles, like thinking about wallets and a lot of even the scams or taxation. There just is not the infrastructure that has been built yet. So how do we make sure that you are diversified, and that you understand at the end of the day whether it's not that you need to now like pick a lane or do both. It doesn't really matter. We're not here to, have people take an opinion. We're not going to enforce our opinions on that.
Right.
But it's more so if you understand, and you are given the tools and cultural knowledge and comfort to be able to invest in anything that you want, then we've got something, right? We can help people, because a lot of the issues are just getting started and continuing in your journey when it's so fragmented today. And so we're building those tools, but we're also building excitement and culture around both of those worlds, so that people feel like, hey, investing can be fun, it can be engaging, it can feel safe and be safe as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned I think this whole world of crypto, Web3, NFTs, all of that. There is so much of, there are scams, it's not regulated, I don't know what to do. I mean, the first time I went to set up my digital wallet, I abandoned the process like 3 times, right? I'm like, what is this? And listen, I'm in the older generation, but I wanted to learn more. And I think for women in particular, we want to learn more. We want to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, what's the objective, what's the potential outcome. It's less about being risk averse. It's just more about being informed.
Yes.
And that's a big part of what Shares is trying to do.
Exactly. Absolutely. And something that we have been doing, this is like a really fun feature, is, we push out market news in really fun ways, as well as even through the newsletter. So if you sign up as you're waiting for the app, what we do is every week on Wednesdays, we push out a newsletter that is quite personalized to you, as well as you're able to see market news in ways that you understand. And it's just really fun. It's also community oriented, where we showcase a lot of stories. So we toast and roast ourselves, and you can understand how people that are quite similar to you are doing. So for example, one of our community members, they purchased a pool suite NFT. It was their first NFT, and they made the decision to do that very, very quickly. But it was the discussion of, okay, if you have ETH sitting around in your Coinbase, do you leave it there to grow, or do you do something like putting it into an NFT, and why? So having a lot of those thoughtful discussions and showcasing those community decisions is really helpful for that learning.
Well, I mean, it's like anything. It's like best practices, lessons learned, right? Real world examples. I think I didn't understand NFTs until a few weeks ago, and now I'm like, oh, I got to buy my next one. But it took a real conversation and learning, and that, I don't like to use the word dumb it down, but just I had to have analogies, right, that made me understand what the why was before I could put invest in it. And then that now wants me to continue to learn. And I think that's where a lot of people are right now. Again, particularly women, is like, I want to learn. I want to consume the information. So that makes me a better investor. That makes me a better, founder. That makes me look at my portfolio in a more diversified way.
Totally. And I think what's really beautiful about our community is that we have such a diverse set of people who are very much in that intermediate part of their journey and have been successful in either stocks and equities, but then don't really know about Web3, or vice versa. They've been really good in Web3, but they're like, hey, how do I sort of hedge my risk and go into ETFs, or like put my money in Web2? And then we have people sitting in the middle. So it's really nice to kind of like be able to pull and be like, this is for everybody. We're all trying to thrive in the economy together, and the economy is very much like Web 2.5.
No, and I think the other thing that I think there's this idea of making sure that there's equity in the market, right? Meaning that everyone has accessibility and can get their piece should they want to, versus what happened really in the original tech boom, right, that I was part of. And it was, I was too young, I couldn't do it, right? I didn't have the funds. And I think what this is doing is, yes, there's that accessibility, but making sure that there are, that we don't create inequities in this new world of the metaverse and Web3 and all of that. So you mentioned the app. So right now, if you go to myshares.com, and for those of you that, if you're not seeing this, it's CHERES.com, myshares.com. That's kind of right now what's happening. And so what's next?
Yeah, so we're looking to launch quite soon, but in the interim, right now, what we're focused on is making sure that our community is as, happy as possible, learning from each other as possible. So what we do is the weekly newsletters. So when you sign up, you are automatically enrolled in that. You also get those preliminary features. And if you want to be a champion member of Shares, or a sharee, as we call it, you can also apply through myshares.com, and you can co-create with us. We do a lot of interviews on a daily basis, and we co-create a lot of those features together. So you have early access and insights into what it looks like. And then another thing we do are events. So we do those on a weekly basis, of course, where sometimes it's educational, or sometimes it's more like hanging out and meeting other retail investors across New York City and Williamsburg.
I love it. And stay tuned for those of you that are listening. Shares and Luminary are going to do something together. So, because I think this is something then that so many of our, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're figuring your next step out, you're in corporate, this is something that women want to know about, right? And especially the younger generations, as well as people of color, right? Because again, when you look at people that have historically been cut out of a lot of these opportunities, it has been, from a gender standpoint, women, and then representation is people of color. So you are doing it. You are doing it as a woman founder, as a woman of color founder, and the app will sometime soon. So that's sort of the next trajectory of the company. You've also, and I want to get a little bit of time just about you and sort of your platform. You've also raised. So can you talk a little bit about that experience? Because a lot of our listeners, whether they're raising or not, this is just a unique part of what many companies go through.
Yeah, we are keeping it hush hush for now, but I can share a little bit more about my own personal journey throughout it. And I think when I would say that it's sort of like understanding where you're coming from and like what your strengths and weaknesses are, just like anything. And so it was really wonderful because we were part of Techstars, and that was over the summer. And so that was a really helpful platform for us to, have a lot of structure around not only the raise, but also just how do we get up, how do we start this? And I think as a woman, I was prepared to sort of be in, and I even prepared my co-founders. I have 2 male co-founders, and I was like, listen, we're going to be in rooms, and these male VCs aren't going to want to talk to me. To you. So just be cognizant of that, like protect me, help me. But it was quite the opposite. Very, very luckily, just incredible women on the cap table, incredible women who have supported us from day one and just really understand what it is that we're looking to build and why and where we are in our journey. And also I would say that the work, it's not just like we showed up and we're like, oh, we're raising it. Yeah. I would say like the 15 years that I've been on YouTube have really helped. And the time that I spent at Accenture, the time that I spent at BCG Digital Ventures, it was a lot of networking and a lot of relationship building where being at the point where it's like, hey, I just started a company. It wasn't so much of like, let me start this relationship. It was more like, you've known me for 5 years. Do you want to support me? And do you want to be a part of this journey with me? And so to other founders, I would say like, don't think of it as like it's a turn on. You're going to like turn on a switch and then expect for people to just, want to come and support you and throw money at you. It's not like that. And I would say you also don't want it to be like that. It is
Mm-hmm.
a long-term relationship, and you want to make sure that you also know who you are going into
Yeah.
business with. So
Yeah. And I can imagine the conversations now versus those conversations originally about the YouTube. What do you mean? That's not the future. They're like, wait, we don't want to miss out on this because this is the future. So I can only imagine the difference in experience from your standpoint. Like, I told you so. But that is the future. But in addition to shares, you also have a lot going on personally for yourself and your own platform and your own thought leadership and brand.
yeah, I have catgarciaonline.com or catgarciaonline across all my social media. And yeah, that has been 15 years of just, doing a lot of sharing, and it's evolved with time, right? We were talking about how I was acting and I helped a lot of people get into entertainment, singers and stuff like that. But then it became more about getting into business, career advice, coaching, and um, highlighting other women in corporate fields or in male dominated fields. But now I've very much evolved that into the behind the scenes of shares, and very much just like being a founder and what that means. And I'm figuring it out, but this time around, I'm just not putting so much pressure on myself. I think in the past, of course, I had Accenture as a public company, so I had to be very careful. I couldn't really
Yes.
share much, and even with shares, my two male co-founders, they're like, "We got to do this right," and I also wasn't prepared to share too much about
Yeah.
where we were in our journey. But I think now it's like, you know what, this is one of my superpowers, and I'm not going to hide my superpower any longer. And like that is the point of having your own company and being your own boss, just owning who you are and what you have to show the world. And yeah, I'm just not gonna hide from my light anymore.
That's amazing. And I love that. I mean, my experience similar for 20 something years, not being able to, because I worked for big banks and, and I get that you're representing the brand. Now it's my own, right? And so it's what you want to put out there. And you, Kat, are really using your voice and in so many ways, right? To bring stories, to educate, to bring awareness, and obviously to create. And so I love that. So we're going to put that up for those of you that are listening or not watching. It's catgarciaonline.com. You can find out more there. But then also, again, my shares. It's mycheres.com. And I'm assuming as far as social, where can they find shares?
They can find us at Shares, CHERES app across all socials. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I am so excited for what you're doing. I was really excited when we got connected, I don't know, last year at some point, and obviously getting involved in the journey and what you're doing. Can't wait to have you back once the app is launched and talk more. But thank you for having a vision, and your two male co-founders, that this is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to create a community as well. So, and thanks for joining us on Goaldigger.
Thank you so much, Kate.
We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned. We'll catch you next week here on Goaldigger, live on LinkedIn. Have a great weekend, everyone. Hold on.